Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully you all are having a wonderful day today. So I thought that I would review this little video. A video that I released, I can't remember how many days ago, but I released a video where I asked the question, is Deontay Wilder a hype job? And a certain amount of people overall took that as me calling Deontay Wilder a hype job. In the video, I actually didn't call Deontay Wilder a hype job. See, I like to review other videos of other channels to see other people's opinions, and I like to overall tune in and chime in a little bit here and there. And I do videos overall where I also don't review other people's videos. But the reason why I think it's important to review certain people's videos is to look at the type of narratives that they're putting out there. Because it really, it's all about narrative sometimes. Because one thing you'll figure out about most people is that most people really don't have a mind of their own. Most of them are sheep, and they'll just kind of follow in to what their opinions are. There's not very many independent thinkers, so it is what it is. But when it comes down to the overall, the question today is Gennady Golovkin a hype job? And today we're going to be looking at this one YouTube channel, not as big as some of the other mainstream boxing channels, got about 700 subscribers, but still, I've seen his channel a couple times before. I think he's called Johnboxing P4P, the best, something like that. And we're going to see what he has to say, and I'm going to tune in a little bit here and there.
So we're not going to talk about this mismatch. Gennady Golovkin's terrible bum fight. We're not going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about...
And let me tell you this. This was not a good fight. So I do agree with him. This was not a good fight whatsoever. I don't know who this guy is. I don't know how to say his name. That being said, overall, I had a lot of the Deontay Wilder fans get on my ass. And I had a certain amount of these race baiting guys saying, oh, you're just a Caucasian man hating on a black man's success and all that shit when it comes down to the overall. Listen, this is another prime example right here. Gennady Golovkin, against this guy. This guy can be ranked by whatever division he wants or whatever belt that he wants. I'm sure he would have been top 10 ranked by the IBF. That doesn't mean you're a great opponent. And when I said the same thing about the Deontay Wilder resume, many people got on my ass. And instead of actually watching the video, they just assumed that I called Deontay Wilder a bum. No, I didn't call him a bum. What I said is that he had a weak resume. And to be quite honest with you, when it comes to Golovkin, Golovkin's resume is very similar. Now, in my opinion, Golovkin would be counted as a little bit of a greater fighter than Deontay Wilder because, in my opinion, not only did I think that he won the first Canelo Alvarez fight, but when it comes down to it, he nearly unified the whole entire division. And his resume, you could argue, is a little bit better than Deontay Wilder's, or at least somewhat comparable. So it is what it is. It's just funny to me how these Deontay Wilder fans, these guys that are part of the LDBC, they claim overall that Deontay Wilder is the face of boxing, and overall Deontay Wilder has this impressive 10 title defense streak, and he has all these knockouts. But yeah, when it comes to Gennady Golovkin, what do they say about him? He's a hype job. They call him a hype job. They say that he didn't face anybody, and to a certain degree, I do agree that he didn't face an elite amount of names out there. I agree. But when you take a look at it, Gennady Golovkin nearly unified his whole entire division, and he was fighting ranked guys. I mean, you can bring up the same argument for Golovkin, but for those of us that really know what we're talking about, the only elite fights out there in Golovkin's career were probably against, say, David Lemieux, who's a B-class fighter, Danny Jacobs, who, in my opinion, is another B-class fighter, and Canelo Alvarez. And those are the only ones. So it is what it is. That's why I say when you compare his resume to someone like a Deontay Wilder's, it's very comparable, and a lot of people are not going to like that. But once again, if you know about the LDBC, if you know about new media, you know what their motivations are. But once again, it's interesting to me because they say Deontay is this great fighter because of his title defenses and overall because of this, and his knockout streak. Well, Golovkin, I believe, had more title defenses even than Deontay Wilder when it came down to the overall. And on top of that, he was also knocking out a certain amount of people, but yet they call Golovkin a hype job. I wonder what that's about. Well, the truth is that we already know what their motivations are. Because once again, the LDBC and new media, which I can only assume this guy is a part of, is pro-black. And that's really all they are. But anyway.
How disgusting this fight is. Gennady Golovkin's fighting Camille Shishkabab. We're not talking about that. Nobody's interested in this fight. But Gennady Golovkin is still on the pound-for-pound list. Yeah, last time I checked, he's still on the list. He's still on the pound-for-pound list. Not too long ago, this is a guy that was the second coming of Marvin Hagler.
What I'll say is this. You could debate that Golovkin could or couldn't be on the list. If you were to debate him in the top 10 pound for pound, I don't have a problem with that. But when I take a look at Ring Magazine, for example, there's no way in hell that Gennady Golovkin should be on the list when you have a fighter like Tyson Fury, who recently beat Deontay Wilder, and he's not on the list. For whatever reason, it is really hard for the heavyweights to get up on that list. I don't know why, but it is what it is anyway.
But you know what? Here's why no.
And one could argue that Anthony Joshua could also have been on the top 10 pound for pound list. One could argue. Now, a certain amount of people are going to get after me. What about Deontay Wilder? In my opinion, Deontay Wilder never was a top 10 pound for pound fighter. And you're going to have all these people say, oh, what about the knockouts? What about the 10 title defenses? All that is great. But when it comes against the resume that he had, when it comes down, I'm sorry, no. And a certain amount of people said, well, what about Golovkin? You just said Golovkin didn't have that great of a resume either. That's correct. But Golovkin also almost nearly unified a whole entire division when it came down to that. And his resume is a little bit better than Deontay Wilder's. So it is what it is.
But he's talking about this bum-ass fight. It's because we're used to it. It's no surprise.
Like, what I'll say is this. Golovkin was at least fighting the overall top 10 guys in the Ring Magazine, you know, and I go mainly by Ring Magazine because Boxing Rec's ratings are pretty much trash, in my opinion. But when it comes down to the overall, when you take a look at Deontay Wilder's opponents, they might have been ranked top 10 by the WBC at a certain time. But when you take a look at the overall, like, Ring Magazine rankings, Artur Spilska, Chris Arreola, Gerald Washington, like, none of those guys were in the top 10. None of them. And the reason why they weren't is because they weren't that great of fighters. It is what it is. And there's one that I'm forgetting here, but Eric Molina, the world beater, you know. But anyway, but Golovkin, here's the thing. He was destroying everyone in his division, Golovkin was. And Daniel Geale, for example, like, he was ranked in the top 10 overall for Ring Magazine. But, you know, this is what I mean when I say you have to really see how long they're there. Because Daniel Geale was not a guy that lasted there for years upon years. Because Daniel Geale is not an elite contender. That's the bottom line. That's why I say you have to wait a certain amount of years, at least a couple years, to determine whether that opponent is an elite contender or not. All right? Like, the elite contenders at middleweight were Golovkin, Canelo, Billy Joe Saunders, Demetrius Andrade, Jamal Charlo, maybe even Andy Lee at one point in time, Peter Quillen for a little bit, I guess. Those were the elite contenders at middleweight, not Daniel Geale and Matthew Macklin. You know, those guys were, you know, in and out. It is what it is. Well, Matthew Macklin, he might have been there for a little bit, but Matthew Macklin isn't really an elite opponent. So this is what I mean when I say this.
This is nothing new to us. This is Gennady Golovkin's whole career, fighting bum fights like this. He's only given us 3 quality fights. Just 3. 2 with Canelo Alvarez and 1 with Danny Jacobs. Well, I'm going to say 4. Because Sergey Derevyanchenko was a good fight.
I'll say 4, but I'd say David Lemieux over Sergey Derevyanchenko. I don't count Sergey Derevyanchenko as an A-class fighter. I just don't. It's really even debatable. But you know what? We'll call him a B-class fighter, but he's lost pretty much every big fight in his career. And, of course, he had a lot of people overall that thought that he lost a Golovkin fight. That fight was very close. Personally, I scored it for Golovkin just by a smidge. But it is what it is.
Derevyanchenko wasn't no bum. And many people believe he didn't win that fight. So his whole career, he has given us 4 quality fights. And the rest has been fights like this Camille Shishkabab. Bum fights.
I agree with you. But are you going to say overall the same thing about a Deontay Wilder? Because from what I've seen from this dude's videos, this dude is a Deontay Wilder fanboy. When it comes down to the overall. Once again, the LDBC, and this is why I'm so interested in this comparison, because the LDBC is so infatuated with a Deontay Wilder. And we already know they don't like the Caucasian or the Latino fan base, and they don't really like the Caucasian and the Latino fighters. So it is what it is. They're not your friends. The LDBC and overall the what's their name? New media, they are not your friends. All right, it is what it is. They are against you if you're if you're a Caucasian fighter or a Latino fighter. All right, it is what it is. They are not objective. They are not logical. They are very over emotional.
But he's still on that pound for pound list. How did he get there? What the fuck did he do? Who the fuck did he beat? What weight class did he come from? What Hall of Famer did he beat? What pound for pound fighter did he beat?
I agree. You know what? I don't completely disagree with you. Now, personally, Golovkin, in my opinion, still at one time would have been on the pound for pound list. But once again, we have to ask ourselves the same thing with Deontay Wilder, because this is what the whole LDBC is saying. This is what the whole LDBC and new media is saying. But then they turn around with Deontay Wilder and they don't ask the same questions. You know, or it comes to another, one of their pro-black fighters that they like, and they won't ask the same questions. You know, this is what I mean when I say the LDBC and overall new media, they're extremely biased. They're extremely pro-racial.
Because every time I look at that pound for pound sheet, his name is always on that fucking list. No reasons to be there, but he's there. While every other fighter got to climb fucking mountains and shit just to be on the list, this motherfucker's there for doing nothing. Errol Spence. This man deserves all the praise in the world.
I agree. Errol Spence does deserve all the praise in the world. Let me tell you something, man. Because there's a bunch of people talking about the Terrence Crawford-Errol Spence situation. Errol Spence is about his business. Errol Spence has actually been the one over Terrence Crawford to prove to me that he's about taking the big fights. You know why? Because he's taking the big fights. I don't give a shit what anybody says about Terrence Crawford. Terrence Crawford does not have one A-class fighter on his resume. Not one. Debatably, Yuriorkis Gamboa when he fought him. But besides that, no. Alright, it is what it is.
This man had been in the ring for, a year? And during that year, we already know what happened to Errol Spence. Dude almost died. So everyone has this huge question marks in their head about Errol Spence. What type of fighter, what type of fighter is Errol Spence going to be Saturday night? But he is going to find out for himself by facing a top 5 welterweight. Top 5. Some people are already prepping to not give Errol Spence credit if he beats Danny Garcia.
Well, he deserves full-on credit because Danny Garcia is no joke. Errol Spence has defeated top contender after top contender. He is very serious about his business and overall taking care of the top contenders. Spence has always been serious, and that's why I give Spence the most amount of respect, you know. But anyway, that's a kid. I don't even think Errol Spence has 30 fights on his resume, but look at his resume already. He's just fought in one division, and he's fought almost every top contender there.
And the ways they're doing that is by shitting on Danny Garcia's career. Who has he beat? Who has he fought? The same old bullshit that we've heard.
Well, that's not completely incorrect. Danny Garcia has not beat anyone really that elite at welterweight. But you can tell Danny Garcia is within a top 5 category of the welterweight division. He is one of the elites. He's just the elite gatekeeper. If you beat Danny Garcia, you're one of the top 4 in the division. If you don't beat Danny Garcia, you're in the lower tier top 10. It is what it is. That's if you even make it in the lower tier top 10 in the first place.
With the other PBC fighters. But Danny Garcia is a 2-division world champion.
Well, there's a lot of people who are a 2-division world champion. I really don't base it off of that. When you take a look at Danny has beaten every B-class fighter that he's fought, but he's also lost every A-class fighter that he's fought. You know, he beat Lucas Matisse. Lucas Matisse, in my opinion, was never an A-class fighter. There's a reason why he lost every big fight in his career. He beat Zab Judah. When Zab Judah was a bit older, he beat the shit out of Paulie Malignaggi, Robert Guerrero. But he lost against Sean Porter, he lost against Errol Spence Jr., and he lost against Keith Thurman. There's a reason for that, because Danny is not an A+ fighter. He's an A- fighter. He's almost a B+ fighter, but not quite. He's elite enough to be in that A category. You know, it is what it is.
He lost some close ones. He lost some close fights to the top welterweights. But at 140, he was a beast. He had one of the best resumes at 140.
And once again, I don't like it when people overall go, well, he was a 2-division champion. Paulie Malignaggi is a 2-division champion. That's that's not really saying a lot. Adrian Broner is a 4-division champion. Like, you see what I mean here? You have to really take a look at the quality of opponents that they're beating. And Danny has beaten some decent opponents, though. So you really have to take a look more at the resume than the amount of weight classes that they've been in. But it is what it is.
147, not that great, but it's okay. He's still a threat at the welterweight division. This man, made a highlight reel knocking out Amir Khan.
And Amir Khan was never an A-class fighter either. And a lot of people overall going to get mad at that. Oh, Amir Khan was killing dudes at that. I mean, who really did Amir Khan beat? Let's be real. He beat Zab Judah, and I think that was an older version of Zab Judah, beat the shit out of Paulie Malignaggi. Two guys that pretty much lose every big fight in their career. It is what it is. That's not me trying to tear down Danny Garcia's resume. That's just me saying Danny is an elite gatekeeper. He's an A- fighter. He is an A fighter, but he's A-.
On Lucas Matiste. That fight with Lucas Matiste, Danny Garcia wasn't the favorite. Many people thought
that's true.
Danny Garcia was going to lose that fight against Lucas Matiste. And Lucas Matiste, at that time...
Is this dude saying Lucas Matiste? It's Lucas Matisse. But anyway, but that's true. Danny Garcia was not the favorite in that fight. Many people expected Lucas Matisse to knock Danny Garcia out. And Danny beat him.
Time was one of the best junior welterweights at that division. I think he was number one. Mark me if I'm wrong. He was the number one junior welterweight at that time back in 2013. And Danny Garcia beat him. Same way he beat Amir.
And let me tell you what, Errol Spence Jr. beat Danny Garcia in a way that I have seen no one else beat Danny Garcia. I think the one time that Danny Garcia knows for sure that he lost is in that Errol Spence fight. So it was very impressive.
Same way he beat Kendall Holt. Eric Morales. This man has a great resume at 140. And then moved up to welterweight division and won a belt. Been in there with some of the best fighters at the welterweight division.
Well, sure, he won a belt, but David Lemieux also at one point in time won a belt at middleweight. So once again, you have to really take a look at their resume. So it's not really about winning a belt, because let's be real, Danny Garcia didn't win the belt against an elite opponent. It is what it is, at least, not A class. So it is what it is. But Danny overall, once again, that's how you have to judge opponents, is who they beat on their resume. And you can just tell when you have an A-class fighter in there. It's subjective, but you can tell when you have an A-class fighter. Like, I believe, did he win the belt against Robert Guerrero? Maybe he did. Like, Robert Guerrero has never been an A-class fighter. And it is what it is.
And this is the man that Errol Spence is fighting, coming off a year layoff and almost losing his life. But yet, Gennady Golovkin, what's his excuse? This is a guy that's trying to cash out.
Well, hey, from what the Deontay Wilder fans tell me, I should believe that this is a big fight, because this guy, I don't even know how to pronounce his name. I'm sure he's top 10 ranked somewhere, so his resume must be better than we think, according to the Deontay Wilder fan base. According to them, ask them. Which is so interesting, because you can tell that they're so racially motivated, because Golovkin and Deontay Wilder have very similar resumes when it comes down to the overall, but yet one is a hype job and one isn't. I wonder what's with that.
The guy that's trying to be recognized as one of the best middleweights, but he's giving us trash fights like this. Like I told you guys before, when Gennady Golovkin hang up them damn gloves, he will be forgotten. He ain't leaving the mark.
Well, I think he'll be remembered. but he'll just be remembered as second fiddle to Canelo Alvarez, which it is what it is.
What has he done to leave a mark in the sport? Who has he beat to make us remember him by beating somebody? He ain't beat nobody. He ain't fought really nobody. This man's whole career is surrounding chasing Canelo Alvarez. And yet Canelo Alvarez, this man has moved on. This man is looking to fight a fighter that Gennady Golovkin had the chance to fight. Canelo Alvarez is a fighter that's linking around 3 fucking weight classes. 160, 168.
Now that's interesting because if you ask the LDBC, when it comes overall, which this dude seems like he's a part of, if you ask the LDBC when it comes to Canelo Alvarez, when it comes to the talks of a Jamal Charlo or Demetrius Andrade, one of their other pro-black fighters that they like when it comes down to the overall, and I'm not saying that Jamal Charlo and Demetrius Andrade are necessarily pro-black. I'm just saying that's who the pro-blacks rep for. If you ask them, all of a sudden Canelo Alvarez is a steroid user. All of a sudden he's avoiding big fights. But when it comes to Gennady Golovkin, do they mention the PEDs? No. All of a sudden the PEDs go away. All of a sudden, Canelo avoiding big fights goes away because they're trying to tear down Golovkin's name. And we all know why they're trying to do that, because once again, they don't like the Caucasian fighters. They also don't like the Latino fighters, but they will turn certain fan bases against one another in order to make a certain fighter look better or worse. Anyway, or they'll use certain fan bases to do that.
And 175. Callum Smith ain't no fucking bum.
I agree. So the people overall that are saying that this is a bad fight, people don't know what the hell they're talking about. But once again, what is the LDBC doing? Oh, well, it's not as big of a fight as Demetrius Andrade or Jamal Charlo, all sort of shit. And, it's probably not as big of a fight as the Jamal Charlo one. But in my opinion, if you had to ask me, Callum Smith is probably a bigger threat to Canelo Alvarez than Jamal Charlo is. Once again, and this is just me, Andrade might be able to give him a little bit of trouble just because he can be a little bit defensively slick. But when Jamal Charlo gets in there, I think a lot of people are really going to be surprised at the difference in class between those fighters. But maybe that's just me. The biggest threat to Canelo Alvarez, in my opinion, if he continues to fight in all these weight divisions, especially at light heavyweight, would either be Dimitri Bivol or Artur Beterbiev.
He's regarded as the #1 super middleweight. This is a guy that won the Ali trophy. This was Gennady Golovkin's opportunity to get that fight, and he didn't. He sat his bum ass at 160 waiting for Canelo Alvarez.
And let me tell you this, Golovkin has not always been interested in taking as big fights as he's claimed. You had a certain amount of these people alleging that Gennady Golovkin was being avoided by everybody. Erislandy Lara called him out a certain amount of times, and he did not want to take that fight. The reason why he didn't want to take that fight is because Lara's a very tricky fighter. Andre Ward also called him out. Golovkin didn't want that fight either. Alright, it is what it is. Yet he had no problem trying to fight Carl Frosch. Alright? So it is what it is.
I hope Canelo Alvarez don't fight this dude. I hope Canelo Alvarez ignore this dude. Gennady Golovkin does not deserve a fight with Canelo Alvarez. He don't. Canelo Alvarez fought Danny Jacobs, fought Sergey Kovalev. Now he's fighting Callum Smith. While Gennady Golovkin's fighting this greased up Backstreet boy. He fought Dinner Rose, and then went through life and death with Sergey Derevyanchenko, and now he's fighting this greased up Backstreet boy.
And let me tell you this, Golovkin is not the same fighter ever since that Canelo Alvarez rematch. You can just tell he's more wore down, and he does not take damage as well anymore. But it is what it is. And Golovkin did rely a little bit on his chin because he was never the best mover. But it is what it is.
While Canelo Alvarez is fighting top competition. Canelo Alvarez should send this man a contract with a middle finger saying, fuck you, move on.
Anyways, that's really about it for today. So that's the conversation about is Golovkin a hype job? Well, one would also have to ask themselves, is Deontay Wilder a hype job? And in my opinion, no. I don't think Golovkin is a hype job. I don't think Deontay Wilder is a hype job. But I do agree that they don't have the best of resumes. And that's all I'm saying in these videos. I'm not a pro-racial person. I'm not a hater. I'm not a lover of any one of these fighters. I'm not a fanboy of any of these fighters. All I'm trying to be is logical and objective. And that's really about it for today. So thank you so much for watching.